We're here on the first floor of the United States Capitol looking at an exhibition on inaugural prints. This exhibition was put together by my office, the Senate Curator's office, and it shows the reproduction prints, but they're prints that we have originals in our collection, and we have an extensive collection of these prints. The prints show the inauguration starting with Franklin Pierce and going through Theodore Roosevelt. And we can maybe have a look at them today and show you a little bit about how inaugurations changed, some specifics about those inaugurations, and also what these prints tell us in terms of the history of inaugurations. This one is one of our first ones that we have in the collection of Franklin Pierce, and it's quite lovely. What it shows is Pierce on the east front of the Capitol. A lot of people, of course, always think of the inauguration on the west front, but that didn't happen until Ronald Reagan's inauguration. Earlier inaugurations during the 19th and early 20th, well, much into the 20th century, occurred on the west front of the on the east front of the Capitol and not on the west front. We move on to James Buchanan in 1857, and what you see here is the beginning of the construction of the dome of the Capitol. Again, they're on the east front of the Capitol. You can see the crowds all around. In fact, even some people way up here on the balustrade. So, of course, as I mentioned, that the dome was being built during this time, and it was also the first inauguration that photography took place. So there are actually photographs of this inauguration. This is one of my favorite views, and I'm not sure exactly why, except I just love the pageantry of the individuals as Lincoln and Buchanan go up towards the Capitol for his first inauguration in 1861. This was a much more extensive, by the time of Lincoln's inauguration, crowds were much greater. It cost to buy tickets to look out over these windows in terms of the inaugural parade. Also, here you see the unfinished Capitol dome, which is sort of significant in terms of the fragmented nation at that time.
Where do you keep all the originals?
The originals are actually, the originals of these prints are kept up in our fourth floor storage in the Curator's secure museum storage. We have I'd say about 1,500 prints in the entire collection, actually more if you include our cartoons. Of the inaugural prints, probably several hundred we have in our collection.
And these are all from magazines?
These prints are from magazines. During the 19th century, starting about mid-century, really the only way people saw these inaugurations was through these prints. These prints were published in popular magazines like Frank Leslie's, Harper's Weekly, the Daily Graphic, and it was the way that individuals saw the inauguration. One thing for this year's inauguration is that, of course, President-elect Obama will be sworn in on the Lincoln Bible, which Lincoln used. And also, there was a table during Lincoln's second inauguration, the Lincoln table, that was made from some of the cast iron elements of the actual dome. And that will be at the inaugural luncheon. The table itself will be inside because of its fragile nature, but it will also be on display. So we have several Lincoln-related memorabilia for the Obama election. And of course, the theme of this year's inauguration is the birth of a new freedom, which of course harks back to Lincoln's inauguration. As we move through the history of inaugurations, of course, we move on into Grant. We have his first and his second inauguration. The second inauguration I want to focus on, and it doesn't show it in this inaugural picture, because of course, one of the other things you have to think about with these inaugural prints is that the artist often idealized what was happening. So, you know, they would make things look a little bit more elegant. They might not tell you in this print that it was sub-zero weather. In fact, it was one of the coldest inaugurations on record. It was freezing. And in fact, although the festivities all went on, the inauguration outside, the light show that they had, and even the inaugural ball was held in a temporary structure, and nobody heated the structure. So drinks froze, people danced with their coats on, and in fact, they had purchased several canaries, birds, to be there, and they actually dropped dead because of the cold weather, I'm afraid. And also the musicians were unable to play because their instruments froze. As we walk on, we move on through the 19th century into the, at this point, inaugurations are becoming more and more pageantry. The parades are becoming larger, the event is becoming more spectacular. James Garfield's inauguration here, you can have a wonderful view of the mall here. These individuals are actually probably up on the Capitol Dome looking down. Of course, for this inauguration, I doubt anyone will be up there, certainly in viewing the event. But again, looking at the parade as it goes down towards the White House. For Grover Cleveland's one, you can again see just sort of the events as they're unfolding here. Also another unusual print that we haven't seen yet, and this is the president and the president-elect leaving the White House going up to the Capitol. That is, of course, tradition that the president and the president-elect ride together or right near each other in terms of going up to the Capitol for the ceremony. This is one of my favorite prints. As you can see, it's a huge print and really shows that inaugural parade as it comes from the Capitol down, the wonderful details here for Benjamin Harrison's inauguration. But as you can see, it was a miserable day. Umbrellas here, the poor gentlemen here on the horses are having a rough time of it. It was not the best of days in terms of the inauguration. However, it was a big event because it was the 100th anniversary of George Washington's inaugural. So for Benjamin Harrison's inauguration, there were events not only in Washington, but also huge events up in New York City, where of course Washington had been inaugurated. And again, here you see the president being inaugurated with the umbrellas covering him. And then we go around to a few last ones that we have in the collection. And our collection really is mostly 19th century because of these prints. By about the 1910 period, engravings really, these types of magazines started to lose favor. Photography came in, and it was more photographic images that one saw. In the McKinley's inauguration, you can see already that these are not engravings, but these are actually photographic images being reproduced. William McKinley's inauguration was the first in which motion picture cameras were used, so we actually have this documentation. So that sort of gives a new element to the inaugurals in terms of especially historical documentation. And here again have some images of McKinley. This is a view from people looking out onto the inaugural from the Library of Congress. So again, it gives you a different view of what's happening, and you get a wonderful sweep of the panorama of Washington. And this Theodore Roosevelt one is one I really like. This is a daguerreotype that we have. It's a photographic reproduction here, but it is one that we have in the collection. So again, going into photography from the engraved medium. But here again is Roosevelt giving his speech, very animated, a very typical pose that people would see of Roosevelt. Roosevelt in this instance wore a ring during the inaugural. It contained a lock of Abraham Lincoln's hair, and it was borrowed from the Secretary of State, John Hay, who had actually served in Lincoln's administration as his personal assistant.
Tell us who can see this exhibit.
This exhibit of inaugural prints, reproduction prints, is displayed on the first floor of the Capitol. It is somewhat of a restricted area, so the general public, I'm afraid, is unable to come here. But if you have an appointment with the leader or with some other senator here in the Capitol, you probably will be walked through these corridors. On Inauguration Day, there'll be many people walking past these corridors, going out onto the platform. And so it is for them and also for the staff. And we also have a virtual exhibit online. If you go to senate.gov and you look under the Joint Inaugural Committee's website, there's a huge history not only of these prints, but important firsts in inaugurations. The Senate Historical Office put together that information. So it tells you some interesting facts about early inaugurations.
What kind of things will you collect this time?
For each inauguration, at least for the last 7 or 8, since our office has become involved in this, the Senate Curator's office has collected a variety of memorabilia from the inauguration. I feel as curator it's important that we have this documentation. In fact, it's very interesting that the Senate records from the 19th and early 20th century have none of this documentation. People don't think about saving the more ephemera material, the programs, the tickets. We'll be saving all of that. The luncheon invitation we'll be saving. We also get one of the gifts that will be given to the participants at the luncheon. The Joint Inaugural Committee has a special gift for each participant. One of those comes to our collection. All of the various IDs and documentation, the police's special badge, some of the ID pins that people will be saving, all of these we will save. And we may even save some things as we normally do from the actual platform, whether it's the carpeting or parts of the balustrade. This is, of course, such a historic inauguration that we want to be be sure that we document as much as possible. I want to be sure that in 200 years' time, well, in 20 years' time, but also in 200 years' time, some curator will say, thank goodness Diane Scavarla was here as curator and saved those items, because I wish that it happened 100 or 200 years ago, since we have such little from those early inaugurations.
You brought some things to show us?
I've brought down a couple of the objects that are in our collection from some recent past inaugurations, just so you get a flavor of the types of things that we collect. This is actually a ticket from 1961 that we have in the collection. So there was some of these earlier inaugurals, paper material that was in other archives that we have now in our collection. And so now what we do is we don't just have one ticket, we collect every single different ticket for the different areas on the platform versus on the West Front, so that we have a large breadth of the different types that are given out to visitors. This is the program. Those guests coming to the inauguration are going to get one of these with their ticket. And this is from Bush's second inauguration, so you get a sense of the type of documentation, and here are the tickets from those inaugurations, specifically for the president's platform. So this was one from Bush's second inauguration, and here's the inaugural luncheon too. After the inauguration on the West Front, the president is going to come back into the Capitol. He will go to a historic room in the Capitol called the President's Room, where he will sign either his cabinet nominations or some legislation. That's a sort of a tradition that's been occurring since Ronald Reagan's first inaugural. And at that point, all the visitors will have time to get into Statuary Hall so that they will be seated when the president then can come in for 1 o'clock. And from 1 to 2 will be the inaugural luncheon. This is a program from the luncheon from Bush's second inauguration. And it gives you an idea of the types of food that was served. Scalloped crab and lobster. Let's see, you had a variety of quail. It gives you a little history of Statuary Hall and a little history also. One of the things our office is involved in is that there'll be a painting as the backdrop behind the inaugural luncheon table. And that, again, follows the theme of each inauguration. And we've been doing that since Ronald Reagan's first inaugural. This is a portfolio that was given at Bush's first inauguration. Sometimes the gifts have been beautiful bowls, cut glass vases. In one instance, it was a large magnifying glass that was given to guests. In this case, it was also, along with the gift, was this portfolio. And the portfolio is quite lovely. And in each one, what you had here was a history of inaugurations. For Bush's second inauguration, it was a vision of America, with the theme being Lewis and Clark. And so the inaugural text here documents all of that. You can see the wonderful, some of the same images, both in our collection, Library of Congress, and others, were all highlighted in this booklet. And then, what our office was very much involved in was this side of the portfolio, which actually had, let me just carefully take this out, that actually had some engravings, reproductions of our collection for individuals to take home. So we had these all reproduced and highlighted for people. There, of course, is Theodore Roosevelt's. This was the treaty. Again, Lewis and Clark was the theme. So not only was it the prints in our collection, but it was other historic documents. And again, here's an image, a photo. And here's a painting, again, of Lewis and Clark. So each year, the chair of the Joint Inaugural Committee will really focus in on the theme and the gifts and the items that will all relate to that theme. One of the other things that I brought today was one of our original prints. Again, as I said, these are study prints, and because they are paper, we want to be careful with them, and we don't have them out on public display. But this is the one that I mentioned I particularly like. It's not a very large print. This is just a single page. This one is from Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper. The paper would have actually been this shape for people to read, with the engravings sometimes being a single page like this, or sometimes they would have been a double page. So as you opened it, some of the larger prints are double pages in terms of it. But again, this is the original print. These were popular magazines, so people can actually buy some of these prints if they go to print dealers. They're not that very much money. What our office has done, though, is they've been systematically over the last 20 and 30 years to be sure we collect as many of these prints as we can. So right now we have a pretty good collection, and in fact we've published a catalog of the prints in our collection.